Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're shifting our rhythm a bit, stepping away from our usual high-energy analyses.
hmm
We're aiming for something quieter, more narrative. This isn't just about recounting facts, it's about slowly unfolding a true crime story, exploring the intricate layers, the secrets, the unseen pressures, and the human elements that quietly converged into an unimaginable tragedy.
Exactly. Our aim here is really to guide you through this narrative, letting the subtle currents of the story emerge rather than just stating them outright.
Yeah.
That's right. Because when we talk about true crime, it's often easy to get caught up in the sensational details, the shock of the event itself. But with this particular story, our focus is deeply on the why, understanding the trajectory that leads to such a seemingly inexplicable act.
Right, the backstory.
We want to peel back the layers, reveal the quiet buildup of the pressures, the psychological landscape, and the slow, almost imperceptible unraveling of a family dynamic that ultimately led to profound tragedy. It's a story that really compels us to look beyond the immediate shock and delve into that sustained, silent suffering.
And the specific case we're immersing ourselves in today is known as the Hallowell murders. It's a case from Springfield, Oregon, that sent this deep ripple of shock through what was widely considered a quiet, unsuspecting community. Our insights for this deep dive are meticulously drawn from excerpts found in the Hallowell murders, a truecrimestory.pdf.
So, our mission today is precisely that, to meticulously unpack every layer of this narrative. We'll begin with the initial horrifying discovery of the crime, then transition into a careful examination of the complex psychological underpinnings of the family dynamics.
Okay.
We'll follow the investigation as it evolved, and finally move through the dramatic events of the eventual trial. Throughout, we really aim to connect the subtle, often overlooked dots, helping you understand the full, tragic narrative that built to this devastating point. And maybe, just maybe, the quiet warnings that were missed along the way.
Okay, let's settle in and truly unpack this.
Yeah.
The opening scene, as described in our source, it really sets up a profound sense of shock, precisely because of the incredible contrast it establishes. The narrative begins by painting this vivid, almost pastoral picture of Springfield, Oregon. It's described as a town nestled between quiet evergreen hills and winding rivers, a place where life moved at a modest pace.
Almost sounds idyllic.
It really does. The language used is, idyllic. Families knew each other by name, students walked to school without fear, and this is telling, most homes kept their doors unlocked.
Wow.
This wasn't just a quiet town, it was a place where trouble felt far away, where nothing truly terrible ever seemed to happen. You could practically feel that tranquil calm, the gentle hum of everyday life before the scorn hits.
Yeah.
It creates this foundation of peaceful normalcy, which makes the subsequent violence all the more jarring.
Indeed, and that carefully constructed calm wasn't just shattered, it was violently ripped apart. The source pinpoints the exact moment the peace fractured. It was a Monday morning, precisely at 7:42 a.m.
So early.
Emergency services received a frantic call from a panicked neighbor on Daisy Street. The caller's voice, described as shaking with terror, reported simply, "There's blood. Something's wrong at the Hallowell house."
Oh, chills.
Yeah. When the first police units arrived at 313 Daisy Street, the horror was immediate and palpable. The front door stood ajar, almost like an open wound, a chilling and unnatural invitation into what was supposed to be a safe, private space.
Right.
Inside, the scene was one of utter devastation. The living room was in disarray, pictures knocked off the wall, furniture overturned, and the unmistakable splatter of blood on the hardwood floor. What truly stands out here is how instantaneously the everyday peace of this seemingly perfect home was obliterated, replaced by this visual testament to profound violence.
It's a stark reminder of how quickly that illusion of safety can just dissolve.
Absolutely.
And the discovery of the victims themselves, as documented in the source, tells a deeply unsettling part of this story. Precisely because of the stark and horrifying differences in how they died. Marie Hallowell, 42 years old, was found first in the hallway.
Okay.
She lay face down in a pool of blood, her hands tragically tied behind her back with a phone charging cable.
Oh, God. With a phone cable.
Yeah. The injuries detailed were extensive and brutal. Blunt force trauma to the head and deep lacerations along her arms, as if she had tried to defend herself.
So a struggle, a definite fight.
Yeah, exactly. It immediately paints a picture of a desperate, prolonged, and incredibly violent struggle. Her death suggests a moment of chaos, a fight for survival, leaving behind a scene of just immense suffering and resistance.
And then, in stark contrast, when officers went upstairs to the master bedroom, they discovered Brian Hallowell, Marie's husband. His death was chillingly different, almost surgical in its execution. He had been shot once in the chest.
Just once.
Just once. And crucially, unlike the scene downstairs with Marie, there were no signs of struggle. The room was undisturbed, no overturned furniture, no defensive wounds. It was just one clean shot fired at close range, indicating an immediate, perhaps even unexpected end.
Wow. That difference is profound.
It really is. This profound difference in the manner of their deaths immediately raises a critical question for investigators and for us too. Why such a disparity?
Right.
Why was one death a brutal defensive struggle and the other so swift and apparently without resistance? It suggests two very distinct interactions with their assailant, hinting at a complex and terrifying sequence of events. This detail fundamentally shapes the initial understanding of the crime.
So the immediate aftermath of discovering Brian and Marie was this agonizing realization that their 16-year-old son, Jason Hallowell, was missing.
Mm-hmm.
In the context of such a brutal crime scene, the community, understandably, jumped to the most immediate and horrifying conclusion: kidnapping.
Of course. What else would you think?
Exactly. The response was not just swift, but incredibly widespread, a testament to the close-knit nature of Springfield. Police launched an Amber Alert. For those unfamiliar, that's the emergency broadcast system designed to rapidly get information out about missing, abducted children.
Right, gets everyone looking.
Yeah. Helicopters circled overhead, their rotors chopping through the quiet air, and volunteers combed the nearby woods, desperately searching for any sign of the teenager.
The whole community mobilized.
Completely. And the community's perception of Jason only amplified this intense hope and concern. He was consistently described as quiet, a little shy, but well-liked at school.
Okay.
He was known for playing clarinet in the school band, working part-time at the local grocery store, and having never gotten into trouble. Everyone, it seemed, reinforced the widespread hope that he was still alive, a vulnerable victim swept up in a horrific event. This collective belief shaped the initial hours.
That collective hope, though, it quickly dissolved into a profound and chilling disbelief. The first crack in the kidnapping narrative appeared when something truly strange happened. Jason's phone.
The one they thought was with an abductor or lost.
Exactly. That phone was located. But it wasn't in the woods or anything. It was just a few miles away, pinging from a cell tower near the bus station in Eugene.
The bus station. That doesn't fit the kidnapping idea at all.
Not remotely. This single piece of information, initially just a geographical anomaly, immediately threw the entire prevailing narrative into radical question. It was the first sign that the story was far more complex and terrifying than anyone had initially imagined.
And it was that shift in location that led investigators to the unsettling revelation captured by surveillance footage. The cameras showed Jason clearly alone, walking into the terminal at 6:15 that morning, carrying a large backpack.
Alone, not forced.
Alone. This image alone was jarring, but what detectives found on the internal footage was truly profound. They watched as Jason calmly walked to the ticket counter, purchased a one-way bus ticket to Sacramento, California, and board the 6:45 a.m. bus.
A one-way ticket. That's
Yeah.
deliberate.
Very. And what was particularly crucial and profoundly disturbing was his demeanor. The source notes it chillingly. He was calm. He looked over his shoulder once, and then he disappeared down the corridor. It was not the frantic, disoriented behavior of a kidnapping victim, but the quiet, deliberate actions of someone with a clear purpose, someone executing a plan.
That unsettling calmness in his movements became a pivotal clue, reshaping everything.
Yeah.
If we connect this piece of footage to the broader picture, it didn't just shift the understanding of the crime, it fundamentally flipped the entire narrative on its head. The Amber Alert, which had mobilized an entire community in a desperate search, was immediately canceled.
Just like that.
Jason Hallowell was no longer listed as missing. The tragic and unimaginable transition had occurred. He was now a person of interest.
From victim to suspect.
In the space of a few hours and the discovery of a few frames of surveillance tape, he became the prime suspect. This abrupt shift forced the community and law enforcement to grapple with the reality far more disturbing than a random act of abduction. It moved the focus from an external threat to an internal, devastating family secret.
What followed was an intensive and widespread multi-state manhunt. Law enforcement wasted no time. A warrant for Jason's arrest on suspicion of murder was immediately issued. The pursuit was a coordinated and extensive effort, involving not just local police but the FBI and California State Police, who meticulously tracked his movements.
So a major operation.
Absolutely. They followed a breadcrumb trail of evidence through bus terminals,
Yeah.
ATM withdrawals, and eyewitness reports. They received specific sightings that helped narrow the search. He was seen 2 days later in Redding, then again in Chico,
Heading south.
each sighting confirming he was moving south, away from the scene of the crime. The relentlessness of this pursuit for a teenager who, just days before, was believed to be a vulnerable victim, it was striking.
Yeah, it underscores the sheer disbelief and urgency of the situation.
Definitely.
Finally, on the fourth day, the multi-state manhunt concluded. Jason was apprehended without resistance at a small roadside motel just outside of Stockton.
Without resistance.
Yeah, the capture itself was quiet, almost anticlimactic, a stark contrast to the national fervor and speculation that had engulfed the story. The country had watched in collective disbelief as this narrative unfolded on every news channel, dominating headlines.
Everyone was talking about it.
Oh, absolutely. The question that consumed early discussions, the one everyone struggled to comprehend and articulate, was profound and deeply unsettling. How could a soft-spoken, straight-A student with no history of violence suddenly murder both his parents in cold blood?
It was just unfathomable. For a community that thought they knew him, and for a nation struggling to reconcile the image of the quiet clarinet player with that of a killer, this question would haunt the investigation and the subsequent trial, demanding an answer that lay far beneath the surface.
Yeah.
Here's where the narrative truly pivots and becomes intensely compelling. The initial agonizing question, how could he do this, starts to unravel, revealing a deeply disturbing answer. As investigators diligently peeled back the layers, they learned that the tragedy wasn't born of a sudden, inexplicable snap, but rather a dark, tangled history of secrets, pervasive control, and years of profound emotional isolation hidden behind the Hallowell family's meticulously polished facade.
That perfect exterior.
Exactly. From the outside, Brian and Marie Hallowell presented themselves as the perfect couple. Brian held a respectable position in finance. Marie was a dedicated nurse, active in the PTA.
Pillars of the community, seemingly.
Totally. They attended church regularly, maintained an immaculately pristine lawn, and frequently posted smiling photos of seemingly joyous family vacations and birthday parties on Facebook. To all appearances, they were the very epitome of suburban success, stability, and familial bliss.
But beneath that meticulously cultivated and utterly convincing surface, the source reveals that their home was, in stark reality, a pressure cooker. Jason had grown up not just under the weight of expectations, but under the immense burden of his parents' exacting and relentless standards. They didn't merely encourage excellence, they demanded excellence in school, in behavior, in appearance. Every aspect of his existence was suffocatingly controlled.
That's intense.
His entire schedule was micromanaged down to the minute, leaving no room for spontaneity, personal discovery, or independent choice. Weekdays were filled with piano lessons, SAT prep, and supervised social time.
Supervised social time?
Yeah, meaning even his friendships and social interactions were curated and controlled, and weekends were spent studying, transforming what should have been free time into extended academic sessions.
It's a lot.
It raises a crucial question about the delicate, often blurred line between discipline and detrimental control, especially when it systematically suffocates a child's autonomy and emotional development. From an expert perspective, the key distinction here is the complete erosion of Jason's agency and emotional validation, creating a learned helplessness and a profound sense of entrapment far beyond typical strict parenting.
And this wasn't simply about rigid schedules or demanding homework. It was about an all-encompassing, severe control that fostered profound isolation. Consider his access to the outside world. His phone, which he didn't even receive until the age of 16, was heavily restricted.
16 is late these days for a first phone.
Very. And even then, his parents read his texts, tracked his location, and blocked access to YouTube and messaging apps. Prior to that, his laptop was password protected by his parents, and he was not allowed to have social media at all.
So completely cut off digitally.
And socially, too. He was not allowed to date, not allowed to go to the mall alone, and even not allowed to speak to certain kids at school who Marie considered bad influences.
Wow. Curating his friendships, too.
Imagine living under that kind of constant invasive scrutiny. Virtually no personal space, no privacy, no genuine freedom to explore his own identity or form unmonitored connections. It's a terrifying portrait of isolation by design.
Beyond these external controls, Jason endured significant and pervasive emotional abuse, particularly from Marie. Any grade less than an A was punished with silence or screaming, creating an environment where perfection was the only acceptable outcome, and anything less triggered a devastating emotional response.
Silence or screaming. Terrible
Mhm.
choices.
Right. He was slapped for backtalk, grounded for days if he looked distracted at dinner, and shamed for expressing what they called self-pity. His emotional well-being was constantly undermined, his feelings invalidated. Brian, while described as quieter, less confrontational, tragically never intervened.
You just let it happen.
Apparently, in fact, the source reveals a truly chilling moment when Jason once dared to ask his father why he allowed Marie to treat him that way. Brian's response was a cold, pragmatic reinforcement of the abuse. You'll thank us when you're successful.
Oh my God. That's devastating.
It is. What's fascinating here from a psychological standpoint is the insidious nature of emotional abuse. It's often invisible from the outside, leaving no physical marks. Yet it profoundly damages the victim's sense of self-worth and their ability to regulate emotions, building a profound inner turmoil that can manifest in unexpected and tragic ways.
Right.
This systematic suppression of his identity created a deeply unsustainable psychological state.
And outside the confines of the Hallowell home, a subtle yet consistent picture of Jason began to emerge from those who knew him, hinting at the hidden life he led. Friends described him as quiet, but always polite, a common description
Yeah.
for someone who keeps to themselves.
Sure, it doesn't necessarily mean anything sinister.
No, but some noticed deeper, more unsettling cues. He seemed tense, nervous, an almost constant state of anxiety that permeated his demeanor. Even more telling, others observed that he would flinch if someone raised their voice too suddenly.
Oh, that's a classic sign. Hypervigilance.
Exactly. A clear, involuntary reaction indicative of living in a constant state of fear or hypervigilance within his own home. At school, this led to a poignant and heartbreaking nickname. He was known as the Robot.
The robot. Wow.
Always present, always on time, but never quite emotionally there. It's a stark description of a child whose inner life was so profoundly hidden, a testament to the emotional armor he had built to survive.
And tragically, amidst these subtle external observations, there were missed warnings.
Yeah.
Teachers, observing Jason's distant demeanor and lack of engagement, made attempts to reach out, sensing that something was deeply amiss.
So people did notice something.
Yes. A school counselor with a professional eye for signs of distress once suggested that Jason might be depressed.
Okay, so an intervention was attempted.
It was. But Marie's response, as documented in the source, was definitive, absolute, and tragically dismissive. Jason is just focused, she told them firmly. We don't encourage weakness in our house.
Weakness. Wow. Discouraging help.
Precisely. This statement not only shut down any avenues for help, but also reinforced the very dynamic of emotional suppression within the home. This highlights a profound and tragic disconnect between how Jason was perceived externally and the profound inner turmoil he was experiencing. The very systems designed to provide support were effectively blocked by the people who were supposed to protect him, leaving him with no discernible escape route.
The stage, as we now understand, was tragically set for an inevitable breaking point. And the final devastating trigger arrived in early June of 2019. Jason had, against all odds and his parents' stringent controls, found a sliver of genuine connection. He had been secretly communicating with a girl named Elena.
Elaine.
They had met in chemistry class, and their connection had deepened through a school computer and a hidden email account. Elena was, in every conceivable way, everything Jason was not: free-spirited, artistic, and full of laughter.
A complete opposite.
She represented a vibrant, unbridled world, utterly separate from his gilded cage. And for Jason, her presence had a profound, transformative impact. She made him feel seen, listened to. For the first time in years, he began to imagine life outside the walls of his parents' control.
A lifeline.
It was more than just a crush. It was a glimmer of true freedom, a nascent spark of hope that offered a vivid contrast to his suffocating reality.
That fragile spark of hope, however, was brutally extinguished with a devastating discovery. One evening, Marie, in her relentless monitoring, found a printout of an email Jason had carelessly forgotten in the printer tray.
Oh no, the worst mistake.
Exactly. It was a clear, undeniable message to Elena, confessing his feelings and hinting at plans to run away.
Run away. So he was planning an escape.
He was hinting at it. The content of that single piece of paper was enough to completely shatter the carefully constructed facade his parents maintained, and with it, Jason's last remaining hope. This raises a deeply important question. What was the psychological weight of that single piece of paper? It wasn't just evidence of a forbidden connection.
It was proof of rebellion.
Proof of an outright act of rebellion, a desperate attempt to break free. For Marie, it represented a catastrophic loss of control, and for Jason, it signaled the end of his secret world and the beginning of the end of his internal struggle.
The confrontation that ensued was, as described, brutal and absolute. Marie was not just angry, she was enraged. Her carefully composed exterior dissolving into a furious tirade, she screamed, slapped him, took away his computer privileges, and threatened to withdraw him from school.
Cutting off everything, his connection, his school.
Systematically cutting off his last remaining lifelines, to Elena, to school, to any semblance of an outside life. Brian, for his part, offered no solace, no protection, no intervention. He simply reinforced the shame and isolation by telling Jason he had embarrassed the family.
Doubling down on the shame.
This double blow, Marie's explosive fury and Brian's passive condemnation, left Jason completely adrift. No emotional refuge, no escape, no hope for relief.
That night, after the devastating confrontation, Jason's despair reached its absolute nadir. He sat in his room, staring at the ceiling, numb with hopelessness.
Numb.
The walls had truly closed in, leaving him with a profound sense of entrapment. This wasn't just a moment of sadness, it was the precise turning point. The culmination of years of quiet pressure finally pushing him past every emotional limit towards a dark, desperate, and unimaginable decision. The source describes him as feeling utterly devoid of choice, stripped of all agency, where the only perceived solution was one of total destruction. The mental and emotional walls had collapsed.
And the very next day, the chilling shift in his behavior became starkly evident. Jason skipped school and walked to the local library.
The library seems so ordinary.
Exactly. There, in the quiet, unassuming public space, he spent 5 hours researching something he never imagined he would consider: how to commit murder.
5 hours, that's dedication. Chilling dedication. Chilling.
This wasn't a sudden, impulsive explosion of rage. This was a deliberate, methodical, and profoundly chilling step, born out of a sustained, agonizing desperation. It suggests a mind systematically working towards a solution to an unbearable problem, however horrific that solution might be.
Yeah.
The library, typically a place of learning and growth, became the quiet incubator of a meticulously planned crime.
The police later uncovered Jason's precise and deeply disturbing search history on that library computer. The queries paint a chilling picture of his mental state and evolving plan. He looked up how to make a homemade silencer, indicating a desire for discretion to control the chaos.
Highly.
He then researched how many Tylenol is lethal, exploring alternative, less violent methods before seemingly settling on another course.
So he considered other ways.
It seems so. He searched for ways to kill someone quietly, again emphasizing the need for a stealthy approach. And perhaps most revealingly, he looked up what happens if parents die and kid is under 18.
Thinking about the aftermath, his own future.
Clearly demonstrating he was thinking about the legal consequences and his own future. The exact date for these searches was June 17th. Solidifying the timeline of this calculated progression, from utter hopelessness to detailed, premeditated planning. If we connect this to the broader psychological landscape, this shift reveals a terrifying internal logic, where violence becomes a perceived means to an end.
The end of his suffering.
Yes.
What's even more disturbing is how Jason then entered a methodical planning phase, cloaked in this chilling facade of normalcy. For a full week after his library research, he played the role of the dutiful son with unnerving precision.
Just acted normal.
Completely. He followed rules, went to bed on time, helped clean the house, presenting an outwardly calm and compliant demeanor. On the surface, absolutely everything was normal,
Wow.
betraying no hint of the storm brewing within. But beneath this calm exterior, each night after his parents were asleep, he sat by the light of his closet with the family laptop, mapping out every detail.
Planning in secret.
He knew he would need a weapon, he would need a getaway plan, and he would need to time it perfectly. The facade he presented to his unsuspecting parents was a masterful and ultimately terrifying act of deception.
Allowing him to methodically lay the groundwork for the unspeakable. Now, we arrive at the night it happened, Sunday, June 23rd, 2019, while his parents were settled in, watching television, completely oblivious. Jason made his first decisive move. He acquired the weapon, his father's old revolver from the locked filing cabinet in the garage.
He knew where it was.
And the source notes a crucial detail. He had seen his father unlock it years earlier and remembered the combination.
So he'd known the combination for years.
It seems so. This speaks to a long-held observation, a stored piece of information that, in this horrifying context, became a critical instrument. He then meticulously wrapped the gun in a towel and placed it in the bottom of his backpack underneath a stack of notebooks, ensuring its concealment.
Chillingly methodical.
Yeah, a chilling act of methodical preparation before the storm.
That night, the deliberate calm, almost unnerving in its precision, continued to guide Jason's actions. He waited, patiently, until both his parents were undoubtedly asleep. Around 3:15 a.m. in the profound stillness of the house, he moved quietly, almost silently, through the darkened rooms.
God, imagine the tension.
The source describes him with gloves on, his heart pounding in his ears. You can almost feel the tension, the raw adrenaline coursing through him in that pre-dawn quiet. The silence of the house itself must have amplified every calculated step, every soft breath, leading him closer and closer to the unimaginable.
It's a moment of profound internal conflict hidden beneath a veneer of external control. He entered the master bedroom first, the room where Brian Hallowell slept. The gun, though unregistered and old, was still functional. With chilling precision, Jason fired one shot into his father's chest. Brian never woke up.
Just like that.
Odd.
Silent.
No struggle, no sound, no alarm raised. The quick, silent nature of this act underscores the calculated intent. What's truly fascinating here is the almost clinical level of controlled calm Jason exhibited in this moment. Despite the immense internal conflict and psychological turmoil that must have been raging within him, it speaks to a mind that had compartmentalized, focusing solely on the execution of the plan.
The silence of that bedroom, broken only by the single shot, speaks volumes about the premeditation. But the meticulously planned attack, so precise with his father, hit an unexpected and terrifying snag when it came to Marie.
Oh, what happened?
She was not asleep. She had gone downstairs for water and had just come back up, catching Jason completely off guard.
She saw him.
She screamed when she saw him, a sound that must have ripped through the quiet of the night, shattering the controlled silence he had meticulously crafted. And what followed was a brutal and desperate struggle. Jason struck her with the butt of the revolver, once, twice, again. She fought back fiercely, fighting for her life. She scratched his face, tried to wrest the weapon from him, but he overpowered her, then tied her hands with a cable from her phone charger.
Cut the phone charger again.
And then in a terrifying, panicked escalation, he stabbed her twice with a kitchen knife he had tucked into his waistband, just in case.
Just in case, he brought a knife too.
Apparently. A chilling detail that reveals both his foresight and the ultimate loss of control in that specific chaotic moment.
This profound shift from the clinical execution of Brian's murder to the brutal, chaotic struggle with Marie, it raises an important question about the unpredictability of violence and the unplanned chaos within even a calculated plan.
Right. It wasn't clean like with Brian.
No. Marie's death was a desperate fight, showing the limitations of a plan when faced with unforeseen circumstances. The detail of the knife, carried just in case, reveals a chilling foresight, a contingency plan. Yet its use in a moment of panicked escalation underscores the loss of control and the raw, desperate nature of that struggle.
It highlights the stark difference between a planned action and the terrifying reality of a confrontation that unravels outside of expectations,
Yeah,
leading to a much more frenzied and violent outcome.
definitely.
At 4:45 a.m., with the horrors of the night finally behind him, Jason left the house. He began a solitary 5-mile walk to the bus station, a journey that, in his mind, must have felt like a path to desperate freedom. He purchased that one-way ticket to Sacramento.
Well, a bid for a new life.
A desperate bid. In that moment, he constructed this powerful, self-justifying narrative, one that allowed him to rationalize the unspeakable. He told himself that he had no choice, that it was freedom or death.
Wow, freedom or death.
For him, this wasn't just a crime. It was an escape from a life he felt was profoundly suffocating him, even at this terrible, irreversible cost.
A diluted sense of liberation purchased at the highest price.
Mm.
But Jason Hallowell would never actually make it to California. His desperate bid for freedom was abruptly cut short. His face quickly became on every news channel, his name trending across the country. The quiet, shy boy from Springfield was now a national headline.
Everywhere.
His image plastered across screens everywhere, and when he was finally found in that motel room alone, the source paints a poignant, almost childlike image, eating dry cereal from a box.
List cereal.
He offered no resistance, no fight. He simply whispered, "I'm sorry," and lowered his head. A quiet surrender.
I'm sorry.
Later, in his first police interview, he offered a profound statement, one that resonated deeply with the underlying tragedy of the case. I didn't want to hurt them, I just wanted it to
I just
stop.
wanted to stop.
Yeah.
It's incredibly sad and chilling at the same time.
It encapsulates the unbearable desperation, the years of silent suffering, and the ultimate destructive desire for an end to the pervasive control that had built within him. It's a chilling insight into a mind pushed beyond its limits.
Jason's trial finally began in January of 2021, nearly a year and a half after the horrific murders of his parents. The courtroom was, as you can imagine, packed with journalists, community members, and former teachers who had once known him as the quiet clarinet player from Springfield High.
Must have been intense.
The atmosphere was thick with anticipation and disbelief. Now, these same people watched as he entered the courtroom in shackles, his head down, his expression unreadable.
A stark contrast.
A stark and haunting contrast to the unassuming boy they remembered. The weight of all those eyes, the enormity of his actions. It was palpable in that silent courtroom.
The defense strategy for Jason, presented by his attorney, was a truly poignant and challenging one. They did not deny that Jason had killed his parents.
No point, really. The evidence was overwhelming.
Exactly. The evidence against him was irrefutable. Fingerprints on the gun, the search history, the surveillance footage. So instead of contesting the who, the defense focused entirely on why.
Trying to explain it.
Yeah. What's truly fascinating here, from a legal strategy perspective, is this pivot. From merely establishing guilt or innocence to a deeper attempt at explaining the profound circumstances that led to the act. It acknowledged the facts but desperately sought to contextualize them, recognizing the need to provide a narrative of unbearable pressure rather than simply denying the act itself.
Highlighting the complexities of intent versus circumstance.
Precisely.
Jason's attorney, a soft-spoken woman named Hallowell, built a powerful, emotionally charged argument. She contended that Jason had lived under extreme emotional abuse for years, a sustained form of psychological torment. She vividly described his home not as a sanctuary, but as a quiet prison, one without bruises but filled with fear.
A powerful image, quiet prison.
To underscore his profound despair, she presented poignant evidence. Diary entries found in his room. That painted a heartbreaking and consistent picture of deep psychological anguish. One entry chillingly read, "Every day I feel like I'm suffocating."
Oh, wow.
Another, even more stark and desperate, simply stated, "If I had a choice, I'd be anywhere but here."
These weren't just words. They were a raw, unfiltered cry for help that had gone unheard for far too long, a desperate testament to the internal agony he endured daily. To further bolster the defense's argument, mental health experts were called to testify. Dr. Leonard Hines, a highly respected clinical psychologist, offered a formal diagnosis. Jason had complex PTSD.
Complex PTSD. How is that different from regular PTSD?
Good question. Complex PTSD is distinct and profoundly relevant here because it arises from chronic, inescapable, trauma-like sustained abuse or neglect over a prolonged period, rather than a single, isolated, traumatic event.
Okay, that makes sense given his upbringing.
Exactly. It deeply impacts emotional regulation, self-perception, and relationships, which aligns chillingly with what we've heard about Jason's upbringing. Dr. Hines' testimony painted a clear, harrowing picture of a child raised in a world of rigid expectations where failure was punished and emotions were suppressed. His powerful summary was chillingly direct. Jason didn't wake up one day and decide to be violent. He was a child pushed past every emotional limit.
Trying to shift the jury's perspective from cold calculation to desperation.
Yes, a desperate act born of unbearable long-term psychological pressure.
The prosecution, however, led by District Attorney Claire Benson, was unrelenting and utterly unsympathetic in their counterargument. She characterized the murders as cold, calculated, and deliberate, directly challenging the defense's narrative of a child pushed to the brink.
No sympathy there.
None. Benson meticulously pointed out that Jason had researched methods, planned his escape, and executed the attack with precision, highlighting the premeditation. Her direct challenge to the jury was sharp, memorable. Plenty of teenagers have strict parents. They do not commit murder.
Oof. That's a powerful line, hard to argue with on the surface.
It was a powerful, uncompromising argument that sought to dismiss the emotional abuse as a justification, focusing solely on the violent outcome and the planning involved.
The prosecution called their own witnesses, including friends of the family who described Marie and Brian as strict but loving, trying to counter the abuse narrative.
Exactly. Attempting to portray a more benevolent side to their parenting.
District Attorney Benson also meticulously argued that Jason had not just killed his parents, he had lied, fled, and showed no remorse until he was caught.
Emphasizing the calculated escape and his stoicism.
Her conclusion was unequivocal and damning. This was not the act of a desperate child. This was the act of someone who believed he could get away with it.
So two completely opposing views of Jason.
Absolutely. This entire line of reasoning raises that important, complex question about how intent is weighed against circumstances in court, especially with these two starkly opposing interpretations.
After hearing all the testimony, the conflicting arguments, the agonizing details, the jurors deliberated for 3 arduous days.
3 days. Must have been tough.
They weighed the competing narratives. Desperate, abused child versus cold, calculating killer. In the end, their verdict was delivered. Guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder.
Second degree, not first, so they maybe saw some nuance.
Perhaps. The sentence, though, was severe. 36 years to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30. Effectively a life sentence for someone so young.
Yeah, he'll be middle-aged before he's even eligible for parole.
A somber, quiet end to a tumultuous legal battle.
The courtroom fell into a profound, heavy silence as the sentence was read. Jason himself stood still. His expression did not change. Maintaining that stoicism he had displayed throughout the trial, almost as if observing his own fate from a distance.
Did he react at all?
As he was led away, he looked once towards the gallery, his gaze settling briefly on Elena, his former classmate, his only real connection.
Elena was there.
She was. She sat there, with tears in her eyes, a quiet, poignant moment of shared tragedy, a silent acknowledgement of the life he had lost and the profound destruction he had wrought.
Wow. A fleeting, yet deeply meaningful exchange. In the aftermath of the trial and sentencing, the house on Daisy Street, the scene of such profound tragedy, was sold quietly. The new owners, perhaps trying to erase the history, painted the exterior a different color, replaced the mailbox, and removed the backyard swing that Jason had used as a child.
Trying to start fresh. Understandable.
Understandable, but as the source profoundly states, the story could not be painted over. The physical alterations could never truly erase the indelible memory, the chilling reverberations.
No, some things leave a permanent mark on a place.
The quiet calm of Springfield had been irrevocably altered.
The case indeed left an enduring legacy, refusing to fade from public consciousness. It continued to be a topic of discussion in news reports, documentaries, and online forums, a chilling modern cautionary tale.
Yeah, you still hear about it.
The source offers a particularly profound summary that beautifully captures the essence of this complex tragedy. A teenager pushed beyond the brink, parents who may have meant well but created a home filled with silence and fear. A tragedy that did not begin with murder, but with the small, quiet ways a soul can be broken over time.
That's powerful. The small, quiet ways a soul can be broken.
It serves as a stark reminder that the seeds of such horrific events are often sown long before the actual violence explodes, quietly festering in hidden corners, eventually leading to catastrophic outcomes.
And what of Jason Hallowell now, years after the events that forever changed his life and the community?
He is now 21, serving his sentence in the Oregon State Correctional Institution.
Still so young.
He continues to pursue a GED, reads often, immersing himself in the quiet solitude of books. And in a poignant, heartbreaking detail, he writes letters to no one.
Letters to no one. That's haunting.
A quiet reflection of his continued profound isolation. In an interview given in late 2023, years into his sentence, he offered a powerful, somber reflection. He said with a quiet gravity, "I think about them every day, about what I did, about how it could have been different."
He expresses remorse then.
It seems so, but he added this. But that's the thing about silence. It leaves you with no way out, and once you break it, the sound can destroy everything.
Wow. The sound can destroy everything.
It's a haunting, deeply introspective statement about the unbearable pressures that built within him and the devastating, irreparable force of their ultimate release. This, then, is the enduring, quiet story of a boy who never raised his voice until the day he simply couldn't stay quiet anymore.
So what does this deeply intricate and quietly devastating story mean for you as a listener? Perhaps it serves as a profound reminder to look beyond the surface, to truly listen for the quiet struggles that might be hidden beneath even the most polished, perfect facades. It encourages us to consider the silent prisons people can inadvertently build, or tragically be built into, and the devastating, unimaginable consequences when those carefully constructed walls finally come crashing down, often with far-reaching and irreversible impact.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the power of unseen pressures and the complex nature of human behavior under duress. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a story that continues to resonate with its quiet yet profound lessons.